Are we ready?
All right, we're ready.
All right, let's get started, please. I do want to say a couple of things before we get going through the slide deck. One, we have about 27 people on Zoom right now, and I'm on somebody else's Zoom because I'm hearing an echo. Echo. Is it that one? It's probably that one. I got to mute my own laptop. I want to be taking the chats over here on my laptop because for the Zoom people, but to be considerate of those on Zoom, let's remember that side conversations that it mumbles it for them. And if you're far away, like Jesse, if you have a question, you may have to speak up a little bit, but we will do our best to repeat the question for the Zoom as well. Does that make sense? And I also want to say that any discussions about commissions today are merely for example only. Right? We're going to say that out loud. They're for examples for situations. Was that fair to say, Lee? Okay. Other than that, thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for jumping on. And hopefully we're not going to run down a rabbit hole, and we're going to try to get you a little bit of focus on this and let you know that it is way more opportunity than it is fear, right? This is opportunity. It's not fear. So we're going to let Lee lead this. And of course, we'll have questions and conversation as we go through it. So thank you, Lee.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So how many agents here have had clients call them about the NAR lawsuits or buyer agency agreements or anything like that? Just a couple? Interesting. Okay. So what we're going to cover today is the NAR settlement and specifically rule changes. So everybody should have a packet there in front of them. What we're going to do, we are going to get through the NAR settlement changes. The next packet after that is IAR related, so Indiana related. One thing about Indiana, they've jumped out ahead of quite a few states and are taking this head on. So the next packet is more concerning Governor Holcomb signing the new bill requiring buyer agency agreements. So as of July 1st, we will have that. So for ongoing training up until that point, it's not required by the state, and we've decided not to require it yet until it is. But we're going to do training a couple times a month here in the market center. So being able to go over the buyer agency contracts, talking about your value. What is it, March 26th?
Yes.
We have a class here
1 to 5.
from 1 to 5. And not Gary Keller, but Jason Abrams and Mark Willis, our new CEO and president. They're going to be going over value. So how you're going to be able to talk with your clients about you as a buyer agent, what you bring to the table. Because as a brokerage, as Keller Williams, we want to get out in front of this in our market. And we want to be able to be on people's minds at the forefront that they, when they think about buyer agents, they're going to think about you and they're going to think about Keller Williams. So for those online, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in chat. Looks like there's 6 of them. Ben is going to monitor that. So we're going to go through. There's 5 changes, rule changes. I'm going to read through the change, and it's going to be open for discussion, open for questions. If you have any recommendations, any suggestions, I know some of you have already decided or thought about how you're going to tackle this with your own clients going forward. So, all right, here we are. All right, so the NAR settlement. In the settlement, NAR agreed to make changes to its rules that will affect MLSs owned by realtors associations and any non-realtor MLSs that opt into the settlement, agents who list or show homes on the MLSs, and agents who are members of NAR. These changes will likely take effect mid-July 2024. All right, so number 1. All right, buyer representation agreements required. So agents working with buyers must sign a written buyer representation agreement with the buyer before the agent can show a home listed on the MLS. Unless inconsistent with the federal or state law, the buyer representation agreement must include at least these 3 things. Agents must disclose the amount of or rate of compensation they will receive or how this amount will be determined. 2, the amount of compensation must be set in the agreement, such as a percentage or a dollar amount, and cannot be open-ended. For example, the agreement cannot say buyer broker compensation shall be whatever the amount the seller is offering to the buyer. Number 3, agents cannot receive compensation for brokerage services from any source more than the amount or rate agreed to in the buyer representation agreement. So, for example, an agent could not accept an offer of cooperative compensation for more than the amount or rate agreed to in their buyer representation. All right. So let's start with the first paragraph. Agents working with buyers must sign a written buyer representation agreement with the buyer prior. What do we think? Yeah, so technically, even listing contracts, so any contract that would be signed by a buyer, seller, broker, managing broker, those paper documents, the originals are all supposed to stay in-house in a file cabinet, but we don't do that because most of everything we have is electronic. So technically, yeah, you would have to have that buyer representation on file with me. So
that, but if you ever get asked, you better have it.
correct. Yeah. So just the same as listing contracts. Some of you have probably been contacted by Joe Googleman at some point at Upstar to ask to prove that you have a listing contract, a valid contract. So the same things. But that's going to lead to a lot of questions on who's policing what, right? I think Aaron and Ben and I talked about that. Who's policing it, who's monitoring it, and if something happens, somebody does violate this, you know, what happens in that case. So, but we're going to try to focus on today, though, what we can control, right?
Question.
Yep.
You see this changing, like off-city leads? Essentially, if you receive a lead and they request to see a home, then we're gonna have to obviously get a buyer's agency agreement signed before we go show them that home. So I mean, do you think they're gonna change how we receive leads or anything like that? Essentially?
Who's got Ben? Realtor Doc? Real.
I don't think so, because they're just a referral partner.
Okay.
They have no recourse when it comes to legal or compliance around any of our contracts.
Okay.
So I don't think Hot City is gonna change any of their processes at all.
Okay.
Same with Zillow. It's a referral agreement between the agent and the brokerage and them, so that should remain the same.
Yeah.
All the liability comes on us and they.
Yeah. Yeah, correct.
What about buyers we were working with for this agreement and are still currently working with?
Well, you go with what you have and signed.
Well, I didn't have.
I mean, if you don't have a buyer agency contract, I mean, it would be a good idea to have it, but none of this is set in law yet.
I got a couple questions I can bring up on screen. So how does this affect buyers walking into an open house?
Yeah. So an open house is open to the public. It's not specific to any one client. But if you as an open house agent are talking with a buyer that is not represented and they wish to see additional homes beyond what you're showing them, then you're going to want to enter into an agency contract.
They're just a customer at that point.
Right. So an open house they are customers. Exactly. That's right. There's a difference between a customer and a client.
Well, can I add to that too?
Yeah.
Because people will walk into an open house that are already under a exclusive buyer agency agreement with another agent. So there's 3 things I see coming out of this. And one of them is we're gonna have to get better, develop our skills and get better at being intentional about asking those questions. Okay, if you come to an open house, instead of asking, do you have an agent? Who's your agent? And and I would even go a step further and ask, are you under an exclusive buyer agency contract with that agent?
Right.
Because if they are, then they are just a customer at that point, right?
Mhm.
Not your customer though.
Correct.
And another question on here, Karen asked, how does that work when the listings are not the same as the BAC?
Give me an example.
The example, let's see, so if your buyer's agreement says 2% and they are offering 3%.
So we'll cover that, but we can jump ahead real quick. So you get the 3%.
It had to be through amendments and such. right?
No,
Well, hold on, because the buyer agency agreement, we cannot accept a commission greater than what we agreed to through that agreement.
That's right.
Yeah.
no,
You'd always want to put it at least.
yeah,
No, I think.
no, that's open-ended.
You can't take less, the buyer is gonna be obligated to meet, there's an obligation for them to meet whatever you agree to. So if you write 3%, you could amend that,
Right.
For us. but when the buyer signs that, that is a legal binding and enforceable contract that your both parties are entering into, so they are obligated to pay you whatever they signed, whether they agree to sign.
Not a give aware.
You're worth your weight in gold, Danny.
Yeah, and another question that came out was, what happens if the buyer doesn't know any better and signs a VAC with more than one realtor?
The first one is valid. The first one that is signed and dated
Yeah.
is gonna be the one that's gonna stick.
Yeah. I'm just saying that out loud, so we all understand.
Okay. Any other questions around that one? Number one, Brittany.
So you show them the house, you write up the contract and everything, and they haven't spoken to that other agent, that agent can still get the commission for that. Is that if they haven't followed the rules in the buyer's business agreement where it says you have to do certain things, and if that person's not showing them any homes that hasn't done anything for them, are they no longer meeting the terms of that contract where it would make it null and void?
I don't know that that's for us to be able to determine though.
But in his instance where he said he didn't know, so you didn't know the other person wasn't, that they had already signed an agreement. You came in a second, you done all the work since then, and they haven't contacted that other person. That other first one is still valid.
Well, in that situation, it's an abandonment issue
Yeah.
on the other agent, but we,
There's still procuring costs.
You could have a procuring cause case, but procuring cause isn't the first person that showed a home, the last person that showed a home, it's not even the person who wrote a contract. Procuring cause, and listen up, is a series of ongoing events that ultimately leads to the sale. So you're gonna have to prove with a timeline and documentation that you didn't abandon the client and that you were adding value to them and fulfilling the duties that you have as an agent through that signed exclusive agency agreement. And so we need to read through those, attend Lee's class on that contract so that you understand what your duties are as far as performance to the client. Because you're exactly right, because if we don't perform, we are in breach of contract on our end, and potentially that buyer could get out, and if they have a subsequent buyer agency agreement, that agreement could be enforceable, so.
Make sure that you're logging all your communications. Have those people saving emails. And
Texts, emails,
emails are the best because even though if you save there on your phone, you could have programmed it, there could be some falsity in there.
Yeah, got a couple more here, Lee, but it's okay.
we got Teresa.
Oh,
I'm assuming there's gonna be some type of mutual release, like if the buyer and the agent, come to terms on whatever else, I mean, there has to be, right?
Yeah,
that's one of the questions is that on the thing also, is how does a buyer withdraw from that BAA if they want to change agents?
so there's an amendment and there's an addendum to the buyer agency agreement, new as of this year. Until they come up with a mutual release, we can use the amendment.
And another question on here was, can you get an amendment to the BAA if need to update the percent
You can prior to writing a purchase agreement.
prior to writing purchase?
Mhm. Yeah. Right, does that make sense?
So like if I had 7% listing and I had the seller, obviously, and then if I had a buyer that was gonna double dip that, the buyer agency agreement said 3, but I was giving out 3.5, then I could amend that buyer agency to say 3.5.
Prior to a purchase agreement.
So if you had the buyer, if you were selling the house and you had the buyer that was coming in, before you write that purchase agreement with your buyer, you need to go back to your seller and say, hey, I'm bringing the buyer. I need to amend
You
my
can amend the buyer's
compensation
agency agreement.
before you write the purchase agreement of your buyer to your listing.
Before you.
or at the same time.
Or at the same time, I mean, if this is a buyer new to you, you're the listing agent, you wouldn't have had a buyer agency agreement anyways. And so I would write the agreement to match what the listing was gonna pay.
Okay,
So you're not amending the listing agreement, the buyer's agency.
okay.
You were saying that because it's all one person, right? You essentially.
Say that again.
I said you're saying that because it's all one person, you essentially, right?
Right. All right, and then on still first page, I had some notes on here, right? Agents cannot receive compensation for brokerage services from any source more than the amount. We know that, for example. So we talked about transaction fees. Right? We charge transaction fees. So that's not a part of the commission. It is in our world when we receive it in. So that's not a part of commission, and that's not your the upfront charge on the buyer agency agreement. The retaining fee, the retainer fee, that's not your transaction fee either. So after discussion, we recommended putting it into other on the buyer agency contract. I think that's number 4. So under other, you would list the transaction processing fee, the colorway.
On top of the line, see that one under that?
So, yeah, we need it on the contract because the office policy is a disclosure. And not,
Technically, that transaction fee is a bonus commission. That's how everybody looks at it. Your accountant, our bookkeeping department. It's money that's coming to you. We are 1099, so we're a commissioned employee. Or not employees, we're contract employees, so who work by 100% commission. So that transaction fee, any portion of that comes to you. It needs to be on that exclusive buyer representation agreement because the total commission you receive cannot exceed what's in that agreement. So if you're getting 3% and a portion of the transaction fee, you need to account for the transaction fee on that contract.
Okay.
so something else that we had discussed, and I don't think we got an answer to it, but I at least want to put it out there that there's builder promotions. So you can enter that in other, but you probably want to know, I mean, in advance, if you're working with a builder that is going to pay you those bonuses, and that's where you're taking your client to, I would work it into your buyer agency agreement and put that under other. And if we, yeah,
But again, if you were just going to meet with a builder and they were gonna pay you, say, 4%, before you write that contract with them, you would just write a new or amend your
Yeah.
existing one, just.
yeah. Aaron was first.
I was gonna say, kind of piggybacking off Scott, you kind of piggybacking off Scott, I was gonna say you might wanna, do like an amendment, your own amendment, and get in writing the extra amount that they're gonna give you. Like if it's a 3%, if it's a 5%, deal or something like that, whatever the deal is, $1,000 bonus extra, get it in writing and send it over to them, have them sign it, and then you get it back, or else you might not even get entitled to it.
So do y'all work have a program where the first one is just 3%, the second one is like 500, 1,000 like that? So if you have like 3-4 contracts signed, but you don't know which one is supposed to. That's.
It's a good question. Anybody got an idea? You should repeat that. So DR Horton is an example. Progressively, when you sell 1 and then 2 and then 3 homes, their commission to you increases, right? Is that what you're saying? So the commission rate increases. Well, if you're working with multiple buyers at the same time, you may not know which is going to qualify you for a higher second commission and then a higher third commission. I mean, I guess that'd be a great thing to have, right? Like a big problem with that. But again, I think it's just uncovering and staying on top of your client with the builder to understand what's happening. I mean, it's very difficult with building because if you get that contract up front, like it tells us, you may not know which builder they're gonna go through, if they're gonna buy a spec, if they're gonna build brand new.
Well, to go along with that too, like, I mean, in reality, we're just gonna be amending this commission all over the place. Like you say that we're supposed to amend it prior to a purchase agreement, but you have pricing adjustment for inspections, pricing adjustment for appraisals. And it says in here that you can't have it be open-ended, so is it open-ended to say that in the BAA that my commission to be 3% plus my transaction, let's say it's $500? Is that open-ended or?
I don't think so.
So, I mean, we're just gonna be amending this, right, all over the place.
Yeah.
At every turn, you're gonna have to be changing it with the change of pricing. That's just the reality. You're gonna have to be amending it constantly.
So from title perspective, Angie, you're gonna want to see the buyer agency contract, right? Because that's what's written in that shows us the commission as opposed to us just texting you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we generally don't see those,
Okay.
which is why we reach out, but if you guys can send it over to Stadia, phone call or email later. Okay, yeah.
It's gonna get real interesting because, I mean, what's gonna happen, and this could maybe be for a different day of discussion, but. You know, who gets eyes on the other BAA? Like, is that gonna be something like requiring a pre-approval letter prior to a showing that I need to see that BAA prior to that buyer agent showing my house? And what if I see it coming in at the closing table and it's dated for after they're shown?
Yeah.
Void?
Yeah, I don't know that that's for us to be policing and asking for.
Okay.
No, I mean, they're all great questions.
The unknowns that are gonna pop up, that we're gonna see a BAA come through the title company dated for 2 days prior to closing.
Yeah.
And now it's subject.
Yeah, and who said, right, I mean, and who says they get in trouble, right? Like, what's the repercussion for us knowing that some agent did that? But, I mean, I don't know, most of us know real estate agents tend to work in the gray area. You know, and there's gonna be a lot of this going on. I mean, there's a ton of brokerages, I'm positive, that aren't doing this. Right, and so agents are out there just going to be making things up as they go along. I mean, we have I think a duty to help educate the rest of the market when it comes to other agents as well. Yeah, Teresa.
I know he brought the last question. So as far as like closing costs and recording fees and all of that, like that has nothing to do with our compensation. So
No.
I think we're really getting the weeds with that. I mean, it's essentially the commission, and then if we're getting any bonuses or anything like that, and I think worrying about other agents, I mean, I don't think we need to see any other.
Mhm. Yes, very good. Okay. All right, number 2, second page. Offers of cooperative compensation cannot be made on the MLS. So agents cannot make offers of cooperative compensation on the MLS. MLSs must eliminate all broker comp fields and prohibit the sharing of offers of cooperative compensation in any other MLS field.
What does any exclude?
Any excludes remarks,
Well, any excludes nothing, right? Any is,
everything, all encompassing.
so not the agent remarks, you can't say my seller is willing to pay it. Commission or in cooperation, it can be nowhere at all in the MLS.
So we have to call now, everybody.
Email, call, I would recommend calling, I would recommend a blanket email through showing time. Or a text message to anybody who schedules a showing that you're listing.
Showing time to say is.
Showing time. Mhm.
Showing time is not the MLS.
Okay, or agent.
So say it again, so.
Showing time is not the MLS, so you could text through showing time. They schedule a showing, check from them offering what I would do, what I would intend to do. When I list a home is I will send out a blanket email to all realtors in MLS through showing time saying I just listed this property, my seller is offering this as the BAC. That way they have notification of it.
You could do it when they get instructions on, like, here's a code, like, confirmation, so part of your confirmation.
Part of your confirmation, you could put that in there in showing time that there's a, whatever.
Under agent remarks, we put.
You cannot put it under agent remarks.
Can we put see instructions in showtime?
Yeah,
Like, you know,
Yes, you can, absolutely.
Right, so they know.
yeah.
That'll be the new code. Well, they're gonna see it.
Commission, right?
They schedule a showing, they're gonna get that information.
Right, so maybe don't look at instructions.
No, they don't.
Oh, they don't.
They don't look at the MLS details.
Right.
The downside is.
I mean, that is like.
I don't. All right.
So Rocky asked, and this is kind of leading into what we just talked about, can you put in the showing time notes
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, showing time's not there for us.
I just wanted to clarify with that question for Rob. Can you put it in the notes in showing time?
Can I ask a question? Give your crystal ball, what do you foresee agents doing? Are they gonna be offering a commission?
Wait.
To the buyer's agents?
So if number two, under number two is gonna solve some of this. Sellers can offer concessions to the buyer in a public comment field in an MLS listing. Okay? So what that means we're taking commission, buyer agent commission, we're taking closing costs, we're taking title costs, we're taking any of that the seller is willing to pay to the buyer. So you're gonna start seeing in those MLS remarks, seller concessions up to $12,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
We were.
But it's not for us to, I mean, you can't look at that number and go, okay, so that means if they're gonna do 3%, you know what I mean? Like, that seller is offering the buyer concessions. They're not offering them money for commissions. We can't say that, but they can offer concessions. Angel.
Lenders in here. Question for you. So a lot of lenders, you can only do up to a certain percentage for closing costs.
Depending on the loan type.
Right, so if you're starting to write in $12,000 instead of a concessions, what happens when the lender's like, that's not allowed, you can only max it at 3%?
I think you're gonna see percentages more than flat dollar amounts, because they'll, a lot of time when there's buyer financing, or there's a bank or a lender involved, the loan types are gonna dictate what the cap is on concessions that can be made by the seller. And so they're anywhere from, I don't know, 2 to 9%, right, depending on the loan type.
Yeah, so 6% is FHA, 4% VA. It's just very.
Yeah.
Program, so yeah, we would definitely do it as a percentage.
So we would need to have that conversation with our lender, like, hey.
Yes.
Yeah,
What percentage of concession should we put in here to make sure that it covers?
yeah, I would definitely try to make sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go a dollar.
I have a cheat sheet for everybody,
Yeah.
so we'll send it out.
So it says, however, as part of the negotiation of the purchase contract, sellers and buyers, not agents, sellers and buyers can agree to apply the concessions to the buyer's agent commission. As a practical matter, though, it cannot be called cooperative compensation. The amount of the seller's concessions can match the amount the seller would offer as a cooperative compensation as part of the contract negotiations.
You have the wording on that, then, like, what we would have to write that. Is that what we've been using, like, we had
Yeah.
on behalf of that fire agency agreement and stuff?
Yeah. Buyer requests seller to pay buyer's monetary, that's
Is that in here?
that is on your third packet.
Yeah, agents and lenders will be required to see any BAA along with the TA. Please remember, any BAC the buyer will be required to pay will need to be included in their financing required funds closed that need verified for approval.
Say it
The
again.
contractor.
But if the seller's paying it on behalf of.
Just remember, there's a cap on the concessions.
Yeah.
So you need to be careful about doing that because there's only so much each loan is going to allow in concessions.
Well, okay, so my question is, I understand on the buyer side, right, you have 4% concession, right? Why is the seller limited to distributing their net? If it's their net, why can't they distribute however much out of their net proceeds as they want? I don't understand, yeah, I mean, yes, the lender, you know, so I understand, when I'm coming at it from a buyer's agent perspective.
Louder.
But why can the seller not distribute as much as their net as they want? Yeah, because the guidelines of the law, there's a reason we can't go over certain numbers.
It becomes.
So it affects both sides, it's the buyer and the seller. Sorry, I can't.
It affects both sides, is what he said,
The loan.
buyer and the seller.
Yeah. Yeah, because I understand from the buyer side.
If the lender could distinguish between what's actually going to the buyer and what's going to you, that would be, so like,
That's what I'm
Well,
saying.
yeah, send your BAA to the lender,
what's that?
send the buyer's agreement to the lender so they know what they've agreed to pay as part of their commission.
Let's just say you're asking for 2%, is that 2% considered a buyer concession, or is it a seller thing to the realtor and
That's
not
what
going
yeah.
to the buyer?
Right.
That's what I'm saying, the seller saying, hey, I'm willing to,
Right.
when I'm talking about the loan, they're saying out of my net, I'm willing to pay
The realtor.
Not a cooperative, I'm willing to pay it.
Right.
So,
We call it.
So-
You can negotiate with that. Just can't go over the certain.
But I think that what we're trying to differentiate is what's going to the buyer as a, like, concession, closing
Yeah.
costs.
As opposed to that it's on the seller side.
How do you word that? Like, in this, that is, yeah, like what's actually going to their closing costs and then what part of it is going to like the commission side?
Well, I think that's, and this is, where things changed recently, right? So if the seller is offering cooperative compensation at whatever percentage it is, let's just say hypothetically it's 2%. And the buyer agency agreement is for 3%. So then they submit their BAA with the purchase agreement. And they're asking for the additional 1% to meet the obligation to pay their agent as a concession. So in that situation, you could have a commission from the seller, 2% on their side and 1% on the buyer side. I'm sorry, 1% as a concession from them that's factored in as an additional expense. So it can be split up to arrive to that amount. And then we're gonna have people that test the water here. You're gonna have hard-nosed sellers that are like, I don't want to pay the buyer broker commission. And then it's all going to be negotiated as a concession.
My brain hurts.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that the lenders are gonna have to come to a point where they're going to increase, they're going to have to increase the amount that they're allowing in concession.
Those
So-
conversations already happened.
So, yeah, so I got an email from Isaac. He was contacted by a lender, Goldwater Bank. All right, they said, I want to introduce you to our exclusive down payment assistance program. This is a program that matches your first time home buyers 4-to-1. So example, your client has $5,000 to put into the purchase of a new home. We will match that 4-to-1 or 20 grand for a total of $25,000. These funds will be used to cover down payment, closing costs, rate buy down, buyer agent's fee, and to lower the loan amount of any funds.
What lender?
Now, is that through the
So yeah, what lender is this?
Just let me know.
Goldwater Bank. That's specific to them. So I'm not pushing Goldwater Bank. I'm just using that as an example that lenders are going to, but you know, that amount is still tacked on the loan, right? It's probably, right? That amount's probably still tacked on the loan on the end of it.
Yeah.
So the buyer is still gonna pay. It's just, it's a, yeah,
So it'll take you 2 loans to do that.
all right.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask a question that goes back. Mike asked, what is considered an internet aggregator website? So we know what this part of it means here.
The IDX websites, the realtor.com, the Zillows, all of it.
And then his follow-up was, is showing town not that?
No,
Now, that's just, I'll just, please, want clarity.
yeah.
So, from what I've been told, we can post the percentage on our personal website,
Yes,
but it can't be on any other website.
Yeah.
Is that
any
right?
public facing website.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
I'm glad we did this.
Just wanted clarity around that language.
All right, number 3. So we're still on page 2, bottom. Offers of cooperative compensation may be made off the MLS. So nothing in the NAR settlement prohibits sellers or listing agents from making offers of cooperative compensation to buyer agents off the MLS. So ergo, email, newsletter, calls, texts, etc. Be aware that all communications must always be in a TCPA compliant way. Before listing agents can offer compensation to buyer agents, they must disclose and obtain seller approval for any offer in conspicuous language that stands out and is clearly visible.
So is anything gonna change in the listing agreement itself, I guess, because they can still offer the buyer agency, like they can still offer that compensation.
Yeah, there's that in bold print, right? Like right at the bottom of the commission section that says that, well, we offer cooperative compensation to buyer agents, something like that. And that's not exact words though, right? I would expect we're going to see lots of changes in forms. New office policies are going to have to come out. Mutual releases from buyer agency contracts. So typically, Indiana Association of Realtors does not do mid-year changes in forms, so I don't expect that to happen, but it could. An MLS cannot require agents to make or accept offers of cooperative compensation as a condition to joining or participating in the MLS. MLSs also cannot require that offers of cooperative compensation, if made, be blanket, unconditional, or unilateral. So previously, if you had a listing in the IRMLS or just Upstart, right, for an example, and somebody from Indianapolis that's a member of my board wants to bring a client and make an offer on that listing, we didn't have to offer them cooperative compensation.
Yeah,
Right.
it's supposed to be established prior to them either showing the home or writing an offer.
Right, Mr. Pressler? So, so now that's all gone. And you do not have to be a member of an MLS board, in order to be compensated. You're a real estate agent, you're licensees, you can buy, sell real estate, you can help others buy, sell real estate without being a part of MLS. Now, if you're a seller, think about it. I mean, you can post in the MLS, right? But there's no more compensation showing in there. So, but MLSs aren't going to go away. I mean, we still need those services. Questions? Anybody online? All right. All right. Number 4. Brokerages can publish offers of cooperative compensation for their own listings on their own websites. So although MLSs are prohibited from publishing the compensation offers, the settlement allows brokers and their agents to publish seller-approved cooperative compensation offers for their own listings, but not other brokers' listings on their own websites.
They've got to own our technology.
So we can think about this in a positive manner, and I probably will need Aaron's help, Ben. So what's Keller Williams doing right now to help us with this situation, right? We need to start driving our clients to our pages. So because you can't go to realtor.com anymore, you can't go to Zillow at some point and know what a listing compensation package is. So
Chris Cox, who's head of our technology, has already said that they're working immediately to make a spot on each of your KW websites to put a buyer or seller compensation on your KW websites. So it's going to be available much sooner than later. That's their immediate focus right now. So that will be, and then we can also put it on our
Facebook
website. You can share it on Facebook, but you can't go to somebody at Century 21's and share it to your page if it has their seller concession on there. Does that make sense?
So a good
Hold on.
Oh.
So like if you got a friend at Century 21 and you share their Facebook post to yours, and that post reveals the seller is paying the BAC for paying buyer concessions for the agent, you can't post that anymore. You can't share it.
You could share the listing, not the commission.
Right. But
You can't repost a commission. Yeah.
Right,
If their link takes you to to show that they're paying buyers agents, then you can't share it.
Are you sure it's not that link? We can't post, hey, check out this link, they're offering 3%. We can't do that, but
Yes.
how are they gonna monitor sharing? the
Right.
link? That's
Well, there.
So I want to kind of clarify that.
Yeah.
Real quick. So a lot of that, even with the, does a client have a BAA? Knowing those things, it's like a lot of stuff in real estate. Nobody's gonna know until somebody turns it in. Right? Because, I mean, if you really want to be truthful about it, right now, there's tons of laws being broken on Facebook or rules being broken, laws. But nobody's gonna know it until somebody turns it in. Does that make sense?
And there are those agents.
But, you know, our mindset with our brokerage.
Snitches get stitches.
Well,
that's what my stuff's gonna say, that's what now.
Miss KW has spoken. She will cut you.
Guys, what I want to say about our brokerage is that we want to do everything by the book. We don't
Yeah.
put holes, we don't try to find ways around things or shortcuts. We want to do things by the book. We want to be the bar for the rules and the law and the best way to do business. And we want to do it the right way. If you don't know the right way, you want to find out the right way. Yeah. We're not the standard, we're the bar.
That's right.
Does that make sense? And we want to stay that way. Scotty P?
I'm wondering, and I'm sorry, maybe
Yeah.
get into the weeds a little bit, but let's just say you're having a conversation with a realtor, you have a buyer, and they're like, yeah, it's 3%. And then at some point you go under contract and it's a couple days and they're like, oh crap, I forgot this listing is only doing 2%. Ooh, you know, like how, because I mean, what's gonna be enforceable is the contract.
Right.
So do we now need to get a copy of the contract that shows what we're being?
We don't ask for listing contracts as buyer agents to prove.
But because we saw it in the MLS,
Yeah.
we would have someone to go to say, hey, it's in the MLS is this.
Yeah.
Now we don't.
That'd be an arbitration
But-
issue, and at that time, they would request a listing contract.
And how enforceable those are just gonna be, well, that agent just, what they said doesn't matter.
Yeah, get it writing, and I just,
But even if you got it writing from the agent, are they gonna be personally liable for paying the difference between what their contract shows?
I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
Their brother to be
Yeah,
filing an E&O claim and cutting the check.
yeah.
Cause they told you 3%.
Yeah, if they didn't know the difference between one listing and another listing, that's on them.
So I'm thinking that we all need to get that in an email, because that's gonna be the most valid way to track the date, the time, the email and everything, not just a text message.
I do have a question about that too, because let's say, like. Aaron, and I think all of us, because we all work together, they're gonna do the same thing, where we do emails or whatever through showing time to all the agents, like, hey, whatever. But let's say we're on the buy side and we're talking to someone on like the listing agent. And are we allowed to like ask if they don't tell us? Like, if we don't get emails, if like, they're not like the rest of us.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could still have conversations.
Okay, cause I just wanted to make sure that like, obviously laws and stuff, like they're, there's always like, oh, texting and asking permissions and things like that, or
You
like.
can't ask them what they're.
What they're not-
Yeah,
And
only
then-
on your side.
Yeah, and then if we have issues where like, they don't tell us, I guess that's just, we have to. We've already had that conversation with our buyer, like, hey, it's possible that you might have to pay my 3%, is that how we?
Yeah. I mean, we need to, we need to have those, I mean, a lot of this is this disclosure and clients understanding that they have an option to negotiate your compensation. So get everything in writing. I can't express that enough. I mean, you should not be going forward with a potential buyer without some sort of contract. I mean, it has happened in the last 12 months where there were agents that moved forward with helping clients and there was no compensation being offered at the very end of things. And we didn't know until the very, very end. Well, there was nothing in writing. You know, if it's all on a phone call or in in-person conversation, that other person across from you may not be the most trustworthy, right? So we have that fiduciary duty to protect our clients, but you have to protect yourselves as well. We're all professionals. We're all going to be you're in this business to make money. And so, you've got to make sure that you're doing the basics here. So.
Lee, is it fair to say that the conversation needs to be not, hey, you might have to pay me. It's you have to pay me and we might be able to negotiate that compensation.
Correct.
Right, versus I feel like before there was too much of oh yeah, you might have to pay me, but usually we get, that's kind of the big issue.
Most buyer agent contracts I've received have zeros everywhere.
Yeah.
And they use the sentence, they use the paragraph that explains that we will do our best to try to get our commission paid for by the seller.
And the conversation should be, you are agreeing that you will compensate for this and we will attempt to, but we gotta be real clear that they're agreeing to pay. Right?
I mean, yeah, this is an attempt to clean these things up. What's going to happen out of this is we're going to lose a lot of real estate agents are going to get out of the business because they don't have the skill sets. They don't know how to negotiate and have the conversations with buyers because the last 3, 4, 5 years has been super easy. Here, sign here. I'll show you 15 houses. Hopefully we can get one of them and we're all done. Now you have to be so much more professional. You have to express why a buyer needs an agent, because I know that there's got to be a fear out there that what's going to happen with buyers. They're going to just go straight to the listing agent. You know, so I think even more now, it's important to get those listing contracts and get those listings, so. All right, we've got one more.
Do that real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
If they go to the listing agent, they're gonna have to do a buyer's compensation agreement.
They absolutely are.
No matter who they.
No matter who they are.
I mean, you can't just say, okay, I'll take care of you.
If they,
Yeah.
they come to me as a listing agent, I'm charging them 3% because I will be doing the job of 2 agents and I don't work for free. None of us work for free. You can't expect an electrician, a baker, a plumber, a nurse, a doctor to go to work for free. So why would anybody expect you to provide your services for free? At the end of the day, what's gonna come out of this is this is gonna force us to do something we really should have been doing all along.
Yeah, this form is 20 years old in Indiana. The buyer agency agreement is not brand new. This isn't something that's just popped up yet.
I just have a couple questions. So I mean, when it comes to being a listing agent, if you get a sign call off as like your own listing, you have to set up a buyer's agency agreement before you even show your own listing, then probably too.
Yeah, and I have a script for that. I assume since you're calling me direct, that you're not already obligated to working with another agent.
Wow.
And when they say, yes, you're right, I'm not, well, great. Step into my office.
Ah, we all want you to write that down and email us, please.
Since you're calling me direct, you're not already obligated.
This is being recorded, so you can go back.
Those in the back of the room.
Brittany.
So you're saying, Aaron, that if you have your listing as pan six, you're still gonna charge your buyer 3?
Well, no, I mean, I would be a limited agent and I would be collecting both sides of that commission, but I would still have an exclusive buyer agency contract with that buyer because one, it's gonna be required by law.
Okay, I was just sure.
Yeah.
At 9, I was like, how do you go over that?
No, it'd be 6.
It would be 6 because he,
You get a raise.
Yeah.
We're all getting raises.
It-
Read the New York Times.
The other thing this does is protects you against when you go to other areas. And they typically only hold out a 2 or 2.2 or 2.4, 3, 5, 9,
Yes.
or, you know, something like that. You negotiate with your buyer.
Yeah.
You're gonna get paid to do your job. You don't have to worry about going somewhere else.
Yeah.
Whack.
yeah, those poor lake agents.
Couple people asked on the Zoom, when you're asking questions, if you don't mind, try to speak up a little bit, because the microphone's far away. I know sometimes it's hard, but they're trying to hear the questions too, if that's okay.
Yeah, we are working on trying to get a new sound system in here, fancy, so
We need one of those boom mics that hangs from this.
we do.
We're gonna start getting a mic runner.
Or a mic person.
Yeah.
Or Mike, yeah. All right, number 5, agents must make commission disclosures. So agents must disclose in listing agreements, buyer representation agreements, and pre-closing disclosures that broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. NAR must require realtor boards and MLSs to include these disclosures in any form agreements they publish. So that's just verbiage for office policy. That's what that means. So in our office policy, we'll have our attorneys draw up new ones that will have that verbiage. So
So the current listing agreement, though, is that completely updated with those?
no. Okay. All right, so the second packet is IAR. So since the last advisory on February 29th, the Governor Holcomb has signed HEA 1068, creating a state level requirement for a written buyer agency agreement. Wow. This fulfills realtor priorities for protecting broker compensation, promoting client transparency on commissions, and proactively addressing antitrust allegations that have spawned over 24 lawsuits. All right. So it just creates a minimum requirement for written buyer agency agreements. Becomes law effective July 1st, 2024. So buyer agency agreements or any authority to represent a buyer shall show a definite date of expiration and shall be in writing either on paper or in electronic format with one copy to go to the buyer within 3 business days. I hope you all send your clients signed documents after they're all signed. Please make sure you're doing that. Within 3 business days of time of signing, and the original and all electronic files shall be retained in the office of the selling broker. As long as we have your documents in command, that's compliant for us. So that's another reason why we had you upload all your stuff. And since we own all that technology, it's a great place to upload everything. You know, I don't know how many people keep their stuff around paper-wise, but within Command, you can go back several years and pick stuff up. So
Yeah, or in Command for buyers for that contract.
Well, it's there now, but it's optional.
yeah,
Or is it there?
yeah.
That's already there. Yeah, we'll change that to required.
Required.
July 1st.
So there's no strict standard on timing. It says agreements must only be executed before a broker can begin negotiating on behalf of a buyer. Again, brokerages may set their own policies. It's advisable to require signed agreements as early as possible. So I mean, that's just the information for us to take in if we need to require it yet or not. So as of right now, it's not required for KW brokerage here. Realtors may use the IAR buyer exclusivity contract to meet the new requirement, or brokerages may create or customize their own forms. We'll be using IAR as long as we continue to be members. Does that sound right?
Yes.
At page 3 in that packet. So requiring written buyer and listing agreements confirms that clients on both sides of the transaction understand and agree to the terms of broker compensation before any negotiation. When buyers and sellers have signed agreements with their brokers, they can also negotiate directly about compensation as a term of the purchase agreement, apart from any MLS offer of compensation. Buyer can request that the seller pay buyer broker compensation as condition of the purchase agreement, just like requesting for closing costs. Seller can accept, refuse, or negotiate a lower amount. Get a summary of recent guidance on broker compensation, purchase agreement, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah, go ahead.
Popped up. They asked if the July 1st date is based on the closing date or the PA. So.
It is on new contracts. That's a great question. I'm sorry for laughing, but yeah.
And it's something that some people need to know. It's not if you're going through a deal and it closes July 2nd, you're not gonna have to go, oh crap, I didn't do my meeting.
Correct.
It's when it's on contract date.
Yeah. I mean, I would recommend doing this now.
And again, we're gonna have classes built around helping you with language around this and how to build, you're gonna need to do, you're gonna need to do buyer consultations now. To sign this before you show the first house. So you're gonna need to know how to do your value proposition at a high level.
Yes.
So we're gonna have classes.
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, you're gonna hear it. I mean, you're gonna get calls. I want to go see this house.
Yeah.
You know, and we like to react quickly. Yeah.
Yes.
So
That'll be great. Let's go meet at McDonald's.
We're all gonna have to develop some new skills, and like Ben said, you're gonna wanna be able to deliver this in an eloquent way that makes everybody feel comfortable to signing those forms.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, is bold, the new bold coming up, is that gonna be highlighting a lot of this? Are they gonna have some of this in the bold program?
On the parts that, because there is a whole value proposition day on bold, so yes. And there is buyer consultation classes at bold also, so yes.
Another reason you wanna sign up for both.
Sign up for bold. If you're not signed up, sign up. You lingers in the room, sign up for bold. Yeah, like it.
We can, if they say, hey, we really want to meet right now at the house, we can just let them know over the phone, hey, this is what's required, it's form, I'll bring it with you. You must sign it before we enter into the home. Are you okay with that? And then just meet outside the home, look for it, go through it.
I mean, I know what practical reasons, I mean, I know what real life sounds like and how it's gonna play out. You've got to do your best to educate the clients before you go in. I mean,
Step back.
Yeah.
You may not know this, the state now requires that we sign contracts with the buyer, just like listing agents do with the seller. So before we meet the home, have you already signed such a contract with another agent? No? Oh, really? Okay, well, let's meet out there, and the first thing we do is, and you can even send it over to them through DocuSign, download or zip forms before you meet them out there and sign it. Don't just slide pieces of paper or send emails.
Reagan, you got a question?
Yeah, for some of the classes we're gonna have, well, first and foremost, I don't know what's the question, like, things are just coming into my mind, I just like to plan for the future, but I think what Danny just said, or like when we're meeting a client at the property and they haven't, I think you're calling me directly because you don't have an obligation to another agent. Well, if I'm gonna sit down and write immediately or have to sign immediately a BAA over to them or have them sign it in the driveway for 3%, like that's, honestly a disservice to me, the seller, and to the buyer still, because that's not pre-approved, like these BAAs need to be going through the pre-approval process. So
Yeah, oh,
just
yeah.
because- Just because the buyer says, yeah, pay 3%.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like that, they're still not pre-approved, and even if they are pre-approved and they haven't signed a BAA, they're not pre-approved with a BAA yet, so. Whoa, pump the brakes, like, we're not showing this house until your lender reviews this BAA.
Yeah.
Is how I will handle it, because the last thing I wanna do is get under contract, and then. So here's where my question comes in, is I don't wanna get under contract with a buyer's agent with a BAA that says they're gonna pay me 3%. And then, you know, at what point is this not serving the buyer and the seller? Because will a contract fall apart if a buyer can't afford what they agreed upon in the
Yes.
beginning? Like, let's say they spent their down payment for their assets, and now they don't have the money, they just got the closing costs and the down payment. So at that point, is that a financing contingency where the contract's gonna fall apart? And my question is, like, at what point are we not serving the best interest of the buyer or the seller? Because now our commission is part of the contract. Another thought I had is, you know, let's say we are working quickly with people, and we wanna make quick offers, and, you know, the listing, you know, they're taking offers by 5 o'clock tonight, like, maybe as an office, we could formulate like some sort of like instructional video on these BAAs, so that, and maybe we can make it part of like the office policy or a separate document, like, have you watched our BAA video, like, do you understand, like, if these are signed up seen offers from investors in Florida, we're not gonna be able to get in front of them, you know, so.
IAR, if you go to their website, they have videos for the buyer agency.
Okay, maybe using those.
We'll just post the link. Yeah,
So I would say, like, you need to, like, as part of that verification, I'm gonna be like, do they have any cash on hand, you know, to cover that? And then if not, then we need to be prepared to have those concessions that are paid for by the sellers, and that's a
Right.
possibility.
Yeah,
I agree, yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say that too, Scott. We have to remember, if we agree to 3% with our buyer, the seller might be paying.
This is true.
Yeah, so if the seller's paying the 3%, there's no buyer obligation anymore.
So I'd probably say that buyer, if they're maybe on the lower end and they don't have that cash, they'll be like, hey, you owe me this, but we can add that to the price as a concession to be paid for by the seller.
Yeah.
Just remember the cap on.
Right.
That still needs to run through the lender because they may need closing costs,
Right.
associated with the loan and the commission. And then that could very well exceed what that loan program that they're eligible for being put into will allow, so.
Right.
I almost feel like step one is, buyer consultation, but those quick situations, at the very least, a BAA, but before you're writing an offer or showing the home. Yes, we need to pump the brakes and make sure that financially they're qualified through a lender or a bank, we have proof of funds. And we know that if the whole deal can be structured in such a way that it does include the buyer broker compensation as part of that.
Right, and I'll say, with that, it's hard to have a buyer consultation in the driveway. I mean, so, you know, try to make it as professional as possible, meet them somewhere if you can't meet them at the office, or so you can sit down and have a conversation about the process. Just like you would a seller. It's just like you would a seller. That's the way you have to look at it. No, yeah, or Aaron, I didn't see which one was first.
The loan product, and Aaron, Shaw, I agree with this. So veterans that are using the VA loan, they cannot pay, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
You know, I'm getting that, right?
Yeah, they can't, still can't. We got that verified Tuesday.
They cannot pay the buyer commission or a transaction fee, so that will have to come from the seller in the form of concessions, so.
Right, so if the seller is not willing to pay those concessions,
It's gonna make VA
They-
loans.
they won't-
Exactly, and that's so unfortunate.
Yeah.
The VA should have first dibs on any offer that comes in, and if the seller now is looking at a VA, oh, I'm gonna have to pay the commission versus a conventional, I don't have to.
So my question there,
Once
Aaron,
again,
I'm just thinking hypothetically, kind of like Ray, like if I have a situation where I have a veteran, I don't know how many, close a bunch, but most people, the seller, it's kind of one of those things, like, oh, I take this offer because it was a VA.
Yeah.
And so during the negotiations, if I'm sitting across the table, I got a veteran buyer. And the seller, now I gotta talk to the seller, let's just say it's, Emily over at Look. And they're like, well, we're not paying a seller, or we're not gonna pay a buyer. I said, well, this particular buyer is a veteran. And then we're gonna basically, so that's the negotiation that starts like, it's $300,000 house, $9,000 commission, potentially
would they be willing to concede $9,000 for this veteran who is you know what I'm saying? They can go back and do that, right?
Yeah, well, I think, too, that's gonna fall, I mean, really, not a whole lot, the conversation is changing, the destination for all of this is the same, right? Closing table, both parties are paid, how we get there is going to, alter or be a little different. We still are gonna have to educate our buyers and our sellers, so I don't know that every seller that we go sit down and meet with is gonna be, hey, I read the New York Times, or I saw all the NAR settlement, now I'm not paying that much. No, when I go out and I present to a seller, my listing presentation is still the same. What I charge is still gonna be the same. And we'll just have a conversation about those, or with those who, hey, I don't wanna pay the buyer broker commission. Well, may I share with you what concerns me about that?
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, and that's where we're gonna have to be so much better on our.
Right, these classes and knowing our value proposition, be able to drive these new
Yeah.
dialogues and conversations is gonna be so important. This room needs to be packed for the next couple of months until we can get through this and everybody develops the skills they feel comfortable going out and presenting to both buyers and sellers.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting to say, that
We're doing business.
we've got to be at a high level in our listing and our buying conversations.
Yes.
The only thing that's gonna run into a rub that it really need all your brains working together on is if you have a listing and you talk your listing into paying a 3% VAC, there's no guarantee that the VAC for you is going to be paid by the house they're buying.
Oh.
And then they end up with the buyer's agency agreement where you've got 3% and they end up paying 9% instead of 6%. So the thing is that is gonna be the real monkey in the room on this thing. Because am I looking out for my listing? If I tell them to hold out a 3%, and then they sign for another 3% on my buyer's agency agreement to protect me. But I haven't protected them because they may have to pay my VAC. Because the person that's listing the other house, and it's looking on a higher number. Because
Yeah,
nine
be
times
good
out
to
of
go.
10, you're going to a more
Yeah.
expensive home.
Oh, okay, Aaron, I'll come to you in just a second. I got one on the screen I don't want to forget about. So this is the question right here. So if the listing agreements haven't changed and the listing agent negotiates what the commission is according to our forms, is it not the listing agent who pays the buyer's agent?
Yes.
Say that again?
Yeah.
Yep, I will. Yep. Yep, so if the listing agreements haven't changed and the listing agent negotiates what the commission is according to our forms, is it not the listing agent who pays the buyer's agent?
The sellers.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, semantics, semantics. But yes, would be the answer to that question. If it's in the contract.
Yeah, because technically, the sellers agreed to pay the list 6%. And they're just disclosing that, hey, of the commission, you agreed to pay me. I'm gonna do a portion of that, which you agreed to pay me, but we're not present this time. But ultimately, they're paying the listing agent splitting what they agreed to speak to that. So ultimately, yes, then that's always going to, this is all just.
Yeah, and Mike just brought up, I want to say too, is at noon on Monday, Keller Williams, CEO, president, and Jason Abrams is going live for everybody. And I want to do this here in the office, and please fill this room like it is again. And we're going to get KWRI's take on all this as well. Does that make sense? So it's from 12 to 2 on Monday, Eastern time. So David, you guys, that'll be 11 to 1. Make sure that we're doing that also. So Aaron, sorry.
Yes, sir, you got it.
Who's the lady that just left?
Reagan.
Reagan, I'm sorry. So, what Reagan said, I was thinking about that a lot too, but, as far as the buyer's agency agreement, but would we want to get in that still, versus on the back end, even though it includes like lending and stuff like that, pre-approval, but we still want to get ahead of that because that's a relationship, that's an agency relationship, and we know it's a long process. you know, as far as, you know, getting into that agreement instead of it being like contingent upon lending, you know what I'm saying?
Are you just saying that should you talk to the lender about your buyer?
Well, I'm like, okay, so
I
like.
get what you're saying, Aaron. You're saying, hey, I'm not gonna sign this, we're not gonna sign this BAC until we know you can actually be held accountable to it. Right? That's what you're saying, where it's like, hey, sure, you can agree to sign, give me 10%, but to protect everyone involved, I can't just take you at your word. I need to now see proof of funds in the bank. I need to see if it's a loan, or do we just sign it and hope? I think is that sort of what you're asking?
I'm saying that, but also like.
He's like saying that.
So.
You go ahead and have it signed regardless.
Yeah.
You're basically saying to get the relationship,
Yeah, because.
go ahead and get this signed, even though,
Because
I mean,
I put mine out like a year.
yeah.
Because the whole, it's a long process, so if I talk to him, then, you know, we're already in agreement, right?
Right.
But if we're not in agreement, then Scott can still, you know what I mean, or Aaron can still them or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I feel like it's best to still have that agreement, you know, in writing, and then we work with them throughout the process, whether they get, you know, whether you approve them or not. What do you guys think?
You're gonna work with
Yeah, well,
Are you a tour guide or a real?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that's what I'm saying, I don't wanna be a tour guide.
So, so this is how I,
a tour guide anymore, because you can't take them to show.
right, so like I would look at it as like, unless they're like, well, I think about most people that we talk to, right? If they're serious about buying a house, unless they're just like completely not knowledgeable, which I've talked to people that are like, I don't even know where to start. It's like, okay, well, we're probably not ready to look at houses right now because you probably like monetarily, paperwork, like there's so much that goes into it. I understand what you're saying, you're like, hey, you know what, because I'm gonna help you get in touch with the lender before we go look at stuff, I need this signed for that we're in agreement. I'm like, you're gonna work with me because I'm telling you, I'm gonna work for you to get to where we can go look at houses and we don't have to worry about any paperwork, we don't have to worry about any issues with your financing, we're good to go. So I agree with that because I do a year out too. I usually do a year out because I'm like, well, we're having this conversation, especially people that are looking to relocate here. That's who I work with a lot. So a lot of times, like, and I tell Aaron, like, I'm about to figure out script this because a lot of people come here on a whim on a weekend and they're like, well, I'm not totally sold on Fort Wayne yet. Like, I'd love to see some houses. I'd love to see the neighborhood. I'm like, oh, well, that's a little, but at the same time, like, in those situations, like, okay, yeah, I am kind of a tour guide because they're relocating, but I have had issues recently. I haven't gotten a VA since I haven't gotten an agreement signed. I haven't done it. Guess what? I lost those people. They had a call with someone else. They walked into Lansing and went to a new build. I lost them. So I get what you're saying because it's like, well, this is making sure like I don't lose them because of not being diligent on my side of things.
Right.
But I'm not gonna just drive you around to 75 houses
Right.
and just be like, oh, well, let's not, we haven't even talked.
But with that too, what I want to say, hey, no, you're good. Hang on a second. With that, you still can't break relationship.
Right.
Does that make sense? Because you can sign a BAA and that doesn't mean just if they buy something in the next year, you get it. Because if you don't can communicate with them, you still have to keep relationship to keep that contract.
So a couple things,
Yeah.
these are my laws of real estate, time kills deals, get the contract signed.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
time
as soon
kills
as you
deals.
start working with them, I mean, as soon as you start helping them, you're on the clock.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
and it's not real till it's in writing, get the
Right.
contract signed.
yeah, exactly right. So like if you're holding out to wait to see. If you're holding out to wait to see if the buyers can handle that, somebody else might get that signed. And then go look and see if the buyers can handle that in that order. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm gonna bring something up on here too. As Rocky said, one of the most important things needs to happen with this change is list agents need to do a great job of explaining the importance to sellers of why it's at the seller's best interest to allow us to compensate the buyer broker.
Amen, Rocky.
Yeah, don't applaud for Rocky. Right. It is very true. It's a super point that Rocky said. And let's see, let me make sure I don't miss these other ones.
sitting here and we going all the way around one thing, but at the end of the day, we're basically saying the compensation is coming from the seller.
Mm-hmm.
So whether the buyer has a pre-approval or not, the payment is really not coming from them anyway. So why would
Possibly.
you refuse?
Yeah.
You know, yes, unless you have that contingency, why would you refuse to work with someone because they're not pre-approved?
Yeah.
Once they get pre-approved,
Right, right.
it's not even gonna
It's
be a
like,
day.
yeah, it's like we brought up earlier that if, like, for example, it's a VA and the seller's not gonna pay the concessions, that's just a deal that won't go through. You go to the next door,
Right,
you know?
right.
So right now, what I want to do really is just, let's just ask some questions and not just randomly. Let's, you know, I hate to be classroomy, but let's raise our hand so we can have one conversation at a time. Of anything that's in your brain about it, don't be afraid to ask a question, please. So any questions about anything we talked about today?
Official for us to put this together, put the listing contract out, put in the documents, like we attach so many other things in the documents on the listing, so that that information is known and easily accessible. Because we don't currently do that, right?
Well,
Right.
but doesn't the listing contract show the commission on it? You can't. put on
Yeah.
it Unless we'll have, because I'll have commission.
Right.
Because it's even in the attachment.
Yeah.
Right,
The offer of population.
right. Right. Any other questions? Zoomers too, type in your questions. I will read them, I promise. No other questions? Aaron, you got a couple?
Go back and Brian 10% for the first 5 deals.
What's that?
I said, we're gonna go back and grant Brian 10% for the first 5 deals.
Yep.
Price.
Yep. Listen, I 100% agree that if you're not in coaching right now, you need to get in coaching with somebody.
Yeah.
And that-
5 deals, you still don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, you still don't know. And I want to,
25, 35, 55 deals.
and if you look at that in every profession, Gary Keller has 5 coaches. There's not a better real estate person on this planet than Gary Keller, and he's got 5 coaches. I'm gonna make Aaron mad real quick. The greatest basketball player in the planet is Michael Jordan, and he has coaches, right? The greatest golfer on the planet has coaches.
Any of
Coaches.
those NBA players. I mean,
Yeah.
to perform at the pinnacle of anything.
And that's just not the coach on the bench. They have their own strength coaches, they have their own wellness coaches, they have their own nutrition coaches, so they can do their job at the highest level. What kind of coach do you think you should have to do your job at the highest level? Ask yourself that question. Right. What's that, Jill?
I said a retirement.
A retirement coach. Yes, well, so I love that. So I'm gonna actually say something there. When you start real estate, should you have a retirement coach?
Yes.
Yes. I'm gonna ask the mortgage people in the room. So yes, right? You should start your retirement mindset the day you start working. Right or wrong? Marlene,
I have had Brian as my coach from day one. I have continued to pay him 10% of my commissions from day one. Every deal I've done, he's gotten 10%. He will continue to get 10% of my commissions because he is absolutely worth the value. I mean, at any time I can call him, he knows the answer. If he doesn't know the answer, he'll find it quickly. I mean, I could be like, I need this document. It's in your email. Thank you.
Okay.
And you move on, you know?
Yeah.
So it's, and it's just, he has the ability to coach a lot of people, and he's really good at what he does. And it's worth it. It's worth every penny.
I agree. So I got questions popped up here. And, oh, then they went away because more people asked. So Shannon Warner asked, what would be the benefit to continue being a member of NAR?
Yeah.
Great question.
Great.
Right. So I'm going to answer that question right now. How else do you become a member of an MLS? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hey, and they lobby for us for a lot of things.
A lot of things.
A lot of things.
Yeah. You all don't realize what NAR does for us in a political level.
So guess
that
what?
our fact.
Here's number one. They protect us from, guess what they want to do? They want to tax our commissions.
Yeah. Yeah. They've been trying to do that for
They've been
years.
trying to do that for years. So NAR funds the lobbyists that have kept that at bay and have protected our commissions from being taxed.
Yeah. So we're 1.6 million votes strong in Washington is what that is.
Yeah.
is what it is. So NAR helps us a lot, but, and that's the biggest one, just like, your air conditioner guy that come fix it and charge you $100 an hour. He now gets taxed on that $100 an hour. That's why you have to pay him $107 an hour instead of $100 an hour.
Yeah.
So that's one big reason why. So now Mike says, so who does pay commissions? And then Rosales said, in his opinion, the seller pays the negotiated commission between their agent and themselves. In the event there is a co-op agent, it's split via the title company per the listing agreement, which the listing agent and seller agreed. All right, David, start using punctuation. The listing agent and the seller agree to total compensation in his opinion.
Yeah, it's negotiable.
It's
and,
negotiable.
We can get paid by the buyer or the seller. It's negotiable.
Right, it's all negotiable. So, oh, Stacy agreed that Brian is amazing. So Mike said that since even realtors surveyed could not answer this, is it the seller or the buyer that pays the commissions?
Again,
And this has been heard on a couple of, I know some YouTube videos, because they argue that the buyer pays the commission because they get the loan to pay the seller. But it's the seller that's receiving the net funds for their property. So it's the seller that's paying that commission. The buyer's buying the house, the seller's paying the commission out of their net. Does that make sense? More questions? Any other questions in the room? Please ask them right now. If they're swirling in your head, get them out. What's that? Yeah, so Monday, again, at noon, please come back. We'll do it in here again. I will say you can watch it at home.
Hey, just like you guys, we're on a company that was built for times like this, so you want to be here in the room on Monday because our leaders are running towards this so that we lead the charge in our market and in our industry, okay?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Collaboration is key. Nobody succeeds alone. If you think you can sit at home and watch everything by yourself, you're sadly mistaken. Hang on.
26th.
No. March 25th, which is my birthday. You knew I had to get it in there, Aaron. That's right. I did. What I like, anything golf related. So 12 to 2 here, March 25th. March 26th is the value squared class, which is 1 to 5. We're going to play it here also.
26.
The 26th.
That's my brother's birthday.
There you go. So, hang on. I'm going to lead down. Now, go ahead, Marlene.
Okay, so this is one of the things I was talking to my daughter on the way here, is this is why I like Keller Williams, is because we're not like a small mom and pop shop, and we have all of these people helping us at times like this. I can't imagine if you were just a little fly-by-night mom and pop shop trying to navigate all of this. So Keller Williams is worth your cap, it's worth the money, it's worth being part of a great big thing, bigger than you.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Is there anybody you want?
Right, you should come to us.
This is KW.
That's right.
You gotta see the value. If you don't see the value and you work on what's a mindset, an abundance mindset versus scarcity.
Scarcity,
You gotta
yeah.
see the value of
Yeah.
this big group, all these people internationally, resources, great word. Anyway, yeah, it's worth it. It's worth every bit, penny of it.
It's what you'll hear me say a lot. In the absence of value, the only conversation is money.
Yeah. This is huge, especially in a time like this.
And I know nobody in here buys the cheapest car you can find, right? Anybody in here driving a $500 pickup that starts and you're happy?
I used to.
Yeah, used to. Yeah.
Buying the pallet off of the wilderness.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jen. Thank you very much. Are we good with the questions? Does anybody else have a question? Anybody else have a question? Any more questions on the Zoom? Did I miss one? Let's see, wait. Lauren said, so to be clear, if we have not seen it anywhere, a buyer's agent can just ask the listing agent if they're offering a buyer concessions.
Yes.
Yes, is what I said.
They're taking the MLS commission portion out of the out of our MLS sheet altogether.
Correct.
Yes, it will not be a, there will not be a space for that in the MLS. And they do not want you to write it into the public marketing remarks or the agent.
Yep, the only thing you can say is that the seller is offering concessions.
You say, yes, sellers offering concessions.
That's it. Mhm. Yeah, but you can't say for buyer's agent, yeah. Guys, thank you so much for zooming in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. You guys are awesome. Appreciate you.